Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, I want you to picture something for a second. Have you ever tried to work or study or just focus on a tight deadline while a car alarm is absolutely blaring right outside your window? It's literally impossible, right? Well, now, imagine trying to build a multi-billion-dollar economy in that exact same environment. Today, we're exploring a truly fascinating paradox. We are looking at a rapidly rising nation, a country expanding economically and technologically at just breakneck speed that is somehow operating inside continuous, overwhelming noise. We're unpacking a brilliant analysis by Dr. Ryan Baudia about India's hidden cognitive tax. And we're going to explore this really profound relationship between environmental chaos, human creativity, and the ultimate mystery of national progress.
Okay, let's dive into this. If you visit India today, you are immediately struck by two simultaneous, almost totally conflicting realities. On one hand, you've got this undeniable, highly visible progress. We're talking about massive new highways, world-class airports popping up, a booming tech startup ecosystem, digital payments being used for literally everything, and these soaring middle-class aspirations. I mean, India is moving forward, for sure. But then, right alongside all that progress, is this invisible yet absolutely deafening burden. Daily life in so many of these cities is just marked by an extraordinary level of noise and disorder. You've got traffic horns, arguments in the street, loudspeakers, constant construction, and these incredibly quarrelsome television programs. It all creates a near-continuous assault on human attention.
And to put the sheer scale of that progress side of the equation into perspective, just look at this number, 6.5%. That's the World Bank's growth projection for India for the 24 to 25 fiscal year. That cements its place among the absolute fastest-growing major economies in the whole world. So India is unequivocally booming. The nation isn't just stagnating under all that noise, right? The real magic here is that the country keeps charging forward despite it. But it really forces us to ask a critical question. Just how much faster and with how much more dignity could this nation rise if that chaotic burden were lifted? That brings us to Section 1, the hidden cognitive tax, and unpacking the true cost of noise.
To really answer that question about dignity and progress, we need to look at how all this daily environmental friction actually impacts the human brain. Think about this idea of a cognitive tax. I mean, every society has visible taxes, right? You've got income tax, property tax, sales tax. But disorder and noise, they act as severe, totally invisible taxes. The World Health Organization has even noted that environmental noise is a major health concern linked to impaired attention and cognitive performance. Your brain simply isn't designed to process nonstop disturbance without paying a price. Every single horn honk, every sudden loud advertisement, every background argument, it demands a tiny fraction of your attention. On their own, they seem minor, but collectively, they drain your mental potential and produce this deep underlying fatigue.
So, I want you to pause for a second and really think about this. What is the true cost of noise? You see, people get habituated to it. They shrug and say, well, this is just normal. But normal definitely does not mean healthy. If a society lives with constant interruption, the mind builds up these coping mechanisms to just ignore or shout over the noise. But let's be real, mere tolerance is not the same thing as actual freedom.
And that brings us to this incredibly powerful quote from Dr. Baudia. He asks, "How many books are not written because the mind never receives silence?" Wow. The greatest tragedy of this cognitive tax isn't just the immediate irritation. It's the lost possibility. Creativity requires incubation. An idea needs to sit quietly in your mind to blossom into something original. Noise completely interrupts that incubation process. It forces a nation's collective mind to be constantly reactive rather than reflective. Sure, a noisy society might still produce amazing engineers and brilliant traders, but it might severely underproduce philosophers, patient teachers, and deeply original scientific thinkers.
Now, here's the kicker. This pollution isn't just out on the busy streets. It literally invades the home. In so many households, the television is just running for hours on end. News debates devolve into these theatrical shouting matches, and let's be honest, we've all been a captive audience to that at a family dinner, right? But the real impacts are actually profound. It weakens children's attention spans, it entirely replaces quiet adult conversation, and it creates emotional dependency in elders. But worst of all, it normalizes this highly aggressive theatrical national discourse. When a family eats dinner to the sound of a screaming news anchor, they aren't just consuming information, they are absorbing a completely reactive style of civilization.
Let's move to Section 2, India's Magic of Survival, and the Paradox Explained.
Which leads us right into this profound mystery. If this cognitive tax is so incredibly high, how on earth does India continue to produce so many capable, world-class professionals? Well, the answer lies in something called improvisational intelligence, because Indians are forced right from childhood to navigate total uncertainty. Whether we're talking about crazy traffic, thick bureaucracy, random power cuts, or hyper-competitive exams, they develop this phenomenal cultural survival skill. It's the ability to just somehow manage. It is essentially a high-level cognitive workout disguised as a daily commute, a brilliant kind of adaptability born entirely out of raw necessity.
Let's break down the structural magic of this resilience. As you can see, the biggest driver here is family and social energy. The Indian household essentially acts as this informal welfare state and survival network that just pushes individuals forward. Then you've got demographic scale. Even if some potential is wasted, a tiny percentage of a massive population still yields tens of millions of highly capable people. Add to that the improvisational intelligence we were just talking about, and finally, civilizational depth. Beneath all that modern, surface-level noise is a very deep cultural memory that highly values learning, endurance, and duty. Put it all together, and that is exactly how progress is generated straight out of disorder.
All right, on to Section 3, when talent goes abroad and improvisation meets order.
And this brilliantly illustrates the transformation. Take a look at this comparison. In India, the environment is incredibly noisy and frictional, which means so much mental energy is spent just managing the disorder. The result? Pure adaptability. But abroad, in environments built on design intelligence, the surroundings are quiet, they're predictable. That exact same mental energy is suddenly freed from the daily cognitive tax. It's like taking off a heavy backpack you've been carrying your entire life. Suddenly, that energy shifts from just navigating chaos to focusing entirely on excellence, which results in high-order, world-class innovation.
Actually, let's be real here. Indian professionals do not suddenly get a 50-point IQ boost the moment they step off a plane in another country. The intelligence was already there. The discipline, the raw ambition, it was already there. What changes is simply the surrounding environment. Their intense improvisational training suddenly becomes this massive competitive advantage when it's placed inside a system that actually provides order, tools, and crucially, a little bit of quiet.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 4, building cognitive infrastructure and moving from survival to design.
So, here's the big question for us. How can India capture that amazing advantage at home? How can it build environments where its best minds don't feel like they have to leave the country in order to truly flourish? Well, it's going to require a fundamental shift in mindset. For a long time, there's been this tendency to celebrate progress by survival, glorifying the ability to just endure and succeed despite the chaos. But listen, surviving a broken system shouldn't be mistaken for excellence. The next stage of development has to be progress by design. India has to deliberately transition toward the intelligent, intentional design of its public life.
And making that transition requires building what the author defines as cognitive infrastructure. We always hear about physical infrastructure, right? Highways, bridges, 5G networks. And yeah, those are totally vital. But a mature civilization also desperately needs cognitive infrastructure. These are the physical and civic conditions that actually allow the human mind to function well. We're talking about quiet neighborhoods, highly disciplined traffic, peaceful schools, public events that actually have sound regulations.
So what does this actually look like in practice? What are the actionable policy steps to shift from this culture of noise tolerance to one of actual sound discipline? Well, first, it means strictly enforcing decibel standards, especially around vulnerable places like schools and hospitals. It means treating honking as an actual civic violation, not just a cultural habit, and really regulating public loudspeakers across the board. We also need to build quiet public reading rooms and nicely shaded parks. And guys, these aren't luxuries, they are literal mental health infrastructure. And finally, it all comes down to teaching media literacy and establishing dedicated quiet hours at home to protect our own attention.
Now, I know some folks might argue that a quiet, orderly environment is just some Western import, but look at this quote. Civilization is not the absence of vitality. It is vitality disciplined by wisdom. The argument for quiet is actually deeply, fundamentally Indian. Indian civilization has long understood the incredible power of silence. Think about it. The rishi, the seeker, the thinker, they all require inwardness. The deep dharmic traditions absolutely recognize that realization requires attention, and attention requires restraint. Silence isn't a weakness, it's a highly productive national resource. So I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought. India's greatest magic truly is its people, and their sheer ability to push forward through imperfect conditions is absolutely astonishing. But if India is already progressing this rapidly under the heavy, exhausting burden of noise and disorder,
Imagine what this nation could become with true cognitive freedom. Imagine the sheer, untapped potential of a billion minds finally freed from unnecessary noise. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep thinking, and I'll see you next time.